Hello, fellow human light beings. This is Mahadeva, the Thunder Wizard. Welcome back to the thunderwizard.com YouTube channel. So today we are going to delve deeper into the nature of the universe and the beings that live alongside us but may be hidden from our sight. I'm going to tell you the truth about Draconian aliens. We're going to talk about alien-human hybrids, super soldiers, and a few other things. And I'm going to get rid of a lot of the misinformation, outright lies, and confusion there is having to do with the nature of consciousness, the nature of extraterrestrials. And this is based completely on my personal extensive experience communicating with higher dimensional beings who have showed me all kinds of different dimensions. And anyway, bottom line is the vast majority of everything that you have been told having to do with aliens, extraterrestrials, but also with the nature of consciousness and the nature of consciousness in the universe. Now, that's not your fault or anybody else's fault. We live in an illusory matrix, which the ancients called Maya. It is illusion. And in this illusion, we have this false experience that we are isolated. We believe that the third dimension is everything. We think that the universe is the third dimension, meaning the being confined in our own brain, not being able to truly see, hear, or feel anything, having to use the five senses to gather information about our environment. This is just if you want to call it a computer program, you can. It is a virtual reality interaction experience. But the truth is just outside of our perception, which means outside of the third dimension. There are so many unbelievable, bizarre, I can't even put into words what consciousness is, what existence is. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can experience exactly what I've experienced, and hopefully I'll remember to tell you how to do that. In the meantime, if you're new to the channel, go to the playlists and go to the guided interdimensional meditations. I guide you into how to connect to other dimensions, higher dimensional forces. You can go travel to these dimensions yourself. You don't have to take my word for it. But once you experience it, you're going to find out what I'm going to talk about. But today what I want to do is I want to clear away even more of the misunderstandings and go deeper in the truth. And I'm going to be able to stay on topic because I have lists of things to talk about here, which I will be able to share with you. And I won't go off onto too many tangents. So before I do that, of course, this channel is about giving you practical tools. So please take advantage of the links that I make available. The first thing I need you to do is go onto the playlists on the YouTube channel, specifically, as I said, the interdimensional meditation, the Qigong, which is energy work, and the 12 steps to 5D. Those are free, available to you. And if you come onto this channel and you don't research those playlists, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. Go and check those out. If you decide that you want to go deeper into the knowledge that I share with you, then go up here to thunderwizard.com, the website, subscribe to the Warrior 90-Day Lightning Qigong. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. If you want to work with me personally one-on-one, you can subscribe to the apprenticeship options. And again, you can unsubscribe whenever you want. If you want to have access to all of my video courses and teachings, which you cannot find on the members site, And I'm basically giving away, not basically, I am giving away, I want to say $5,000 worth of teachings, and for almost nothing, go here to 923.thunderwizard.com. My books, you can get at michaelwilliamdenny.com. And there, now I've done all the business. Now let's get into the meat of this. The truth about draconian extraterrestrials, alien human hybrids, and super soldiers. Some of those things I just mentioned are actual things. Some of them are lies, and some of them are conflations. Conflation is one of my favorite words. It's a very, very common human failing where we take something that's true and then we combine it with things that's false, and we mix it together, and we can't tell the difference between the true and the false. This is probably the most powerful way that the dark forces control your mind and keep you trapped and keep you prisoner. People who believe that there are false beings of light trapping you in the third dimension, that feeling is accurate. Your understanding is not. It is not false beings of light more powerful than you that are keeping you trapped. It is dark force human beings who have been controlling this world for tens of thousands of years. The society that we live in now is just the latest one. And I know this because my ET friends have showed me and told me there was a worldwide empire that has been destroyed and reconstructed and destroyed. We are in the last worldwide empire that is trying to be created. And these people who are behind this have for tens of thousands of years known secrets about how to get into your mind and how to keep you trapped, how to put spells on you. I talked about it at length. I won't do it today, but I talked about it at length. The whole idea of money and wealth is a black magic spell over your mind. And that's just one example. So we are going to delve into some of the conflations, which has to do with just human nature, and some of it you have been deliberately lied to and led into these conflations, and these dark forces have taken advantage of your human innate three-dimensional fear of the unknown and made and taken advantage of your human false experience of reality that you see in the third dimension and used that to keep you trapped. And so these things we're going to talk about are probably among the most important and most valuable lies that are being used to keep you trapped here. And if you're able to hear what I'm telling you, and if you're able to apply it to yourself, especially in combination with the energy and meditation practices I give you, you can break free from this spell. All right, so let's start with draconian extraterrestrials. Before we do that, what we need to do is I need to break through. I really want you to listen. The best way to learn from me is to listen deeply. It's very possible that what I say to you at the first pass may bounce off of your head. You may think you hear what I'm saying, but trust me, I am saying things on a much deeper level than the average mind can hear. So it's good to go back and listen to things over and over. It's also good to do the practices I teach you to do, because that will allow you to truly hear what I'm saying. By the way, this is why I get frustrated with people who come onto the channel and innocently ask me superficial nonsense questions. Because I can tell if you have learned how to think deeply. And if you have learned how to take the truths that I'm saying on a deep level. And the best way that you can do that is by doing the practices. I know if you're doing the practices. Within the first few words, I know if you're doing the practices. I know within the first few words if you know what I'm talking about. So if you want that, listen deeply to what I'm saying. We're going to take a look at assumptions, because if you do not know, and most people do not know what your assumptions are about the nature of the universe, yourself, and extraterrestrial beings, spirit beings, if you don't know what your assumptions are, then even if somebody hands you the truth, you will throw it away because you won't understand it. So let's take a look at your assumptions. We have to get past this. So false assumptions about ETs and UFOs. Number one, ETs are three-dimensional beings who primarily interact with humans in the third dimension. That is false. I repeated 3D twice. So you need to understand, everything you think you know about reality is based on your third dimensional programming. And until you've been beyond the third dimension, you cannot deprogram yourself. So the average human, the vast majority of people on this planet, they believe that ETs are three-dimensional beings who primarily interact with humans in the third dimension. Why do they believe that? Because everything they experience is in the third dimension. Fact of the matter is that higher dimensional beings are interacting with you all the time, but you can't see or hear them. You literally have a wall that prevents you from seeing and hearing higher dimensional beings, higher dimensional realities. There are realities on top of realities layered right where you are, but you can't see them, you can't feel them because you are trapped within the third dimension. So you project, meaning you project onto the world your experience. Everybody does this, and this is why the deep state, the dark forces can manipulate you, because they know your limitations in terms of what you can believe. Because we all have these assumptions. So this is false. Extraterrestrials are not third dimensional beings. They are higher dimensional beings. They are trans-dimensional beings, interdimensional beings, whatever words you want to use. They can shift in and out of the third dimension whenever they want. They can interact with you on levels you can't even begin to imagine. So when people watch movies, you know, like I'm sure this picture came from some ET movie. When people watch movies with beings like this that abduct you, which does happen, take you into ships, do things to you, wipe away your memory, impregnate you, experiment on you, people believe that that's what ETs are, because that is a third dimensional experience. So you can't even imagine what does happen or can happen in higher dimensions if you've never experienced it. And bear in mind, third dimensional experience also includes paranormal. It includes ghosts, demons, spirits. Just because you're having an experience with something that's non-physical doesn't mean that it's not a third dimensional experience. This is again why people think that alien abductions can only be as a result of extraterrestrial technology, because humans, when they experience the paranormal, which means beyond normal, that is the literal translation of the word. Para means, it's a Latin word and a Greek word and also a Sanskrit word, para. It means beyond. And normal, beyond normal, is anything that's beyond your normal experience. If I pick up a phone and I use a phone and I'm talking to somebody from 100, 200 years ago, and I say, I have magical powers, I have this magic spirit box, here, talk to, that would be a paranormal experience for them. Until you know what it is, and then it's just part of your normal reality. So don't conflate paranormal with higher dimensions. That isn't always the case. But the dark forces want you to believe that paranormal means higher dimensions. It doesn't. So that is the false assumption number one, that ETs are three-dimensional beings who primarily interact with humans in the third dimension. That is not true. Second false assumption about ETs and UFOs: humans do not have advanced technology comparable to ETs. That is false. If you listen to the so-called whistleblowers that are all over mainstream media, they fall back on something and they're hypnotizing you. You don't realize it, but they hypnotize you when they're showing you a picture of a UFO that is man-made, but it's doing things that you don't know that humans have the ability to do, going faster than the speed of light, faster than the speed of sound, being able to defy the laws of gravity, etc., etc. Your assumption, your immediate knee-jerk assumption is that that has to be something beyond Earth because we don't have this technology, and that is false. Just because you're not aware of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So that's an assumption that we need to get rid of, that humans do not have advanced technology comparable to ETs. Number 3, false assumption about ETs and UFOs. Since ETs are three-dimensional beings like humans, they must have the same lower vibrational tendencies, i.e. violence, greed, etc. That is a false assumption, but it is a very understandable assumption. And this is why people, when I tell them actual beings from other worlds who are visiting Earth are incapable of doing anything harmful. And the reason they're incapable is because they live in a higher dimension. And in order to be in a higher dimension, you must be free of these lower vibrational feelings, intentions, and actions. Violence, greed, fear, all of this is a specific vibration that functions within the third dimension. But you don't know that if all you know is the third dimension. So people think they're being clever. They think they're being rational. They think they're having a logical argument when they say to me, that's not what you're saying isn't right, Mike, that these higher dimensional beings are all good and that they can't do anything bad. Because just like people, there are good people and bad people. Just like spirits, there are good spirits and bad spirits. There has to be good ETs and bad ETs. Well, the assumption behind that is that ETs fall into the same category as humans, as spirits, and they don't. Because in order to be a predatory, evil, harmful being, you have to vibrate within a certain frequency. Once you get beyond that frequency, you must operate with that frequency. And higher dimensional frequencies, what ends up happening is that positive feelings, which we are able to experience, like love, compassion, empathy, joy, bliss, those feelings that we can experience here in the third dimension increase when you go into higher dimensions. But lower dimensional things like lower frequency things like anger, greed, fear, those things actually disappear. So it's like, it's a gradation if you look at it. The darker you go, there is some light in there. But once you go straight to the light, there's no more dark. That's why the whole word false being of light is, it's a nonsense word. It's like saying, I'm a paraplegic, but I walk to school. You got to pick one. Pick a lane. Do you walk on your legs, or are you a paraplegic? Do you live in higher dimensions, or are you a lower dimensional being that has anger and fear and wants to cause harm? All right, so that is false assumption number 3. Since ETs are beings like humans, they must have the same lower vibrational tendencies, violence, greed, etc. And again, if you make that argument to me, I already know right off the bat you've never experienced a higher dimension. I know from that first moment that you say that, I know you haven't experienced it. Now, that's not your fault, because nobody in the third dimension experiences it unless they do the work to have that experience. So I always say, go and find out for yourself. Don't take my word for anything. Go experience these higher dimensions for yourself. That's what the interdimensional meditations are all about. Then you'll know. You won't even, you'll know. Just like you know what gravity is, and you know what water is, and you know what air is, because you've experienced them. Nobody needs to explain it to you. All you have to do is say, yeah, I felt the air on my face. And we all know what that means because we've experienced it. Number 4, false assumption number 4 is that ETs don't understand humans, so they must study them like we study animals. That is a very understandable assumption. But again, it comes from our experience. I put in there like we study animals. When we go and we see an animal we've never seen before, we have to go study them because we don't understand them. You know, where I live, there are birds that come every day for me to feed them. And they're extremely intelligent birds. They're Australian magpies. Very intelligent. And, you know, they don't have eyebrows or mouths. They can't show any kind of emotion. And I'm constantly trying, as I look at them, I'm trying to figure out, you know, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? I can't see it because they're just these birds with beaks and they can't speak. And so I can't tell how they're feeling. And so it's understandable. We do that. We want to try and understand. So this is why human beings take animals and take them into the laboratory and experiment on them and do all kinds of things because they don't understand them. So to assume, number 4, that ETs don't understand humans, so they must study us like we study animals, is a rational projection of your experience. But again, it is assuming that ETs are bound within our limited understanding. And again, you think the universe is everything that you can see and experience, and it's not. It's not even scratching the surface. So you can't understand what you haven't experienced. But what we do is we project what we do understand. We do this in relationships. We do this with our understanding of reality. So if you have that feeling that ETs don't understand us, they have to study us, that is an assumption, and it's not accurate. Number 5, false assumption number 5. There are both good and bad aliens just like there are good and bad people. I already addressed this. That is a projection of your third dimensional experience. It is a fact. There are good people and bad people. And then there are people in the middle who are good-natured but do bad things sometimes out of their pain, misunderstanding, whatever. So to assume that extraterrestrials are like that is an unconscious projection. You're not even aware that you do it, of your own experience, which is a very limited experience. Number 6, ETs are at war with each other. So anybody out there, any ufologist or anybody who talks about ufology or talks about aliens or ETs, if they talk about war between extraterrestrials in our solar system, you can completely write off everything else they say. Because again, this is a conflation. People have a very, very hard time believing it. Now let me be clear. Before 2 years ago, before I started having and reached out and started communicating directly with higher dimensional extraterrestrials, before that I had many of these same assumptions. Like the one that we're talking about now, which is that ETs are at war with each other. They must just be like humans. The most powerful ones are the ones that win. There must be good ones and bad ones. Until I experience them. Once I've experienced their reality, and again, you'll say, well, you've only experienced it, you don't know. Trust me, when you experience higher dimensions, you know. Maybe not at first, maybe the first couple times you're trying to wrap your head around it, you might not really know what's going on with that. But once you go deep into it and you repeatedly go deeper and deeper into their world and communicate and interact with them, it becomes absolutely apparent that there is no war between higher dimensional beings. And again, the reason has to do with a frequency. At the frequency that they operate from, one of the first things that happens is you automatically see the other person. You see their intent, you see their feelings, and you know who they are. And on top of that, you identify with them, even if you've never met them before. As long as they are in that same frequency band, which we can also call a dimension, we'll say the fifth dimension, as long as you're within the fifth dimension, you meet any other conscious being, you immediately have a deep love and respect for them and a deep feeling of kinship and family. And it is impossible for those, under those conditions, to go to war with somebody. Also, in order to go to war with somebody, you have to come from a place of lack. You have to feel like you need something that other people have. That's why people go to war. You need something. Land, resources, freedom, power, something. It's always been the case. Every single war is based on somebody feeling like, I'm left out, I want what you have. And at that higher dimensional frequency, just talking about the fifth dimension, at that frequency, that feeling doesn't exist. You have a feeling and an experience that you are completely, totally being nourished and provided for by God, by the quantum field, by energy, by consciousness itself. And you meet another being, you also have that experience with them. And their first instinct is to give to you, not take from you. And your first instinct is to give to them and not take from them. But you don't know that if you've never been to higher dimensions. I didn't know that until I went there. So, this is an assumption. Assumptions to look for that indicate false or inaccurate accounts of ETs. So I want you to be a critical thinker. And critical thinking means that you listen for people's assumptions. You first have to know how you assume things. And how do assumptions work? Assumptions work because of emotional attachment. People believe unrealistic, impractical, false things all the time because they have an emotional attachment. People who have been traumatized as children, they become needy, they become frightened. That's just part of that. You start seeking out people so that you can feel loved, so that you can feel safe, and or you immediately judge people as being unfriendly and unsafe because you learned to protect yourself that way. Now you have an emotional attachment to those behaviors, whether it's you want to believe everybody or you want to mistrust everybody. You have an emotional attachment to that. And until you become aware that this need to feel a certain way has to do with these strong emotional attachments, and let me pick that apart and work through that, until you do that, then you just simply react as though it's the truth. I'm going through this. There's somebody in my life that has judged me completely, totally. I mean, couldn't be more opposite from the truth, but they have a very strong emotional need to feel, to believe this to be true about me, certain things to be true about me. And there's nothing you can say to somebody like that, because all of the rationalization and all of the facts in the world will not get rid of the emotional attachment. So the point is that anybody who's talking about extraterrestrials and telling you ETs this, other worlds that, they're going to have an emotional attachment to what they're saying. And once you learn how to listen for it, you will find out if they operate from fear, if they operate from a victim mentality, if they operate from greed, if they're lying to you. You'll be able to hear all of that. But that can only happen if you know what your emotional attachments are. So again, critical thinking is the first thing that you understand about critical thinking is that everybody has emotional attachments, including me. And when somebody tells me something that gives me an assumption, all women are after your money. That's an assumption. Somebody says that to me, what is my emotional reaction to that? Is my emotional reaction, oh my God, that's horrible? Or no, that's not true. I can't let that be true. Or that's totally right. They are like that. So I'm so glad you said that. It's somebody else. You see, it is true. All women are after your money. Well, somebody who believes that has a very strong emotional attachment. So and it comes from fear. It comes from sadness, loneliness, fear, fear of rejection, etc., etc. So when somebody has these assumptions that I'm going to list, you know that they're operating from an illogical, irrational, emotionally biased place, and you can pretty much reject most of everything they say after that. All right, so assumption number one. Any activity that indicates psychopathy, seeking to predate upon or cause harm to others, or sociopathy, which has a lack of empathy or compassion. This is an inaccurate, false account of extraterrestrials. So if anybody says that ETs seek to experiment on you without your permission, right off the bat, you know that their projection of reality is that you can't trust people. You can't trust conscious beings. So they have now projected that onto ETs, because again, they have a false assumption that ETs are three-dimensional beings. That's all. We already know that's false. Now they're projecting another false assumption, which is that they don't have any feelings for you. We touched on this earlier, that they want to experiment on you because they don't understand you. That you don't realize it, you may accept that. Well, if ETs were to come, this is what the military say all the time, or scientists say all the time. Well, if an extraterrestrial race comes to the planet, the first thing they're going to want to do is study us because they've never seen us before. That's an assumption. You don't know that. And so it tells you their assumptions, and it tells you their victim mentality. So you have to listen for that. You have to listen for that, and you'll find conflations. Like this happens very common with people's accounts of being abducted. Now, abduction is a real thing. I'm not trying to say abductions are false. We're going to explain what that is later. But when you listen to every single abduction scenario, every single one, you will oftentimes hear psychopathy, which is these beings took me by force without my permission. It was very frightening. They took me on a ship. They experimented on me without my permission. They held me down. They violated me physically, sexually, psychologically. That will be there. You already know that has nothing to do with ETs, because our actual assumption is that ETs operate at a frequency that makes it incapable for them to be do anything harmful to you. They can't do it. It's impossible for them. So if somebody has that experience, it means it's not ETs that are doing it. Something else is doing it. So anything like that. But you'll also find conflations where people who have been abducted will talk about blissful experiences. Like they'll be abducted, they'll be physically taken aboard a craft, they will be unable to move, and then some ET will come in and telepathically send them loving feelings. Which, by the way, is an incredibly abusive tactic. That's what abusers do. That's what narcissists do. They control you, they take away your power, but they connect to you and create a trauma bond by knowing when to be loving to you and when to be abusive. And so when you hear about abductions, you're hearing all of the different colors that are involved in a narcissistic abusive experience. So what will happen is people will want to focus towards the positive in that. So if somebody gets abducted and they're abducted against their will, they're experimented on, but then some ET walks in and telepathically sends them this love, what will happen is they will then want to characterize the whole event as a loving spiritual experience, because they'll be having a paranormal experience. Somebody telepathically sending love to them. Right off the bat, you go, okay, humans can't do this. We don't have the ability. We don't have the technology. I'm looking at a strange looking being and I'm feeling this love, and therefore this is a good thing. So it's okay. They're more advanced than us. They don't understand us. They're doing things for our benefit. So that's why they abduct us. That's why they experiment on us. That's why they sexually abuse us. That's why they, take our genetic material or our children. And so I'm telling you this because if you go and listen to podcasts about UFOs, if you go to UFO conferences, you will hear people talking about abductions in this spiritualized fashion, and they'll focus on the spiritual aspect of it, and they will completely bypass the narcissistic abusive part of it, which is being taken by force, having your ability to move taken away from you, and all the other things that I talked about. So any activity that indicates psychopathy, seeking to predate or cause harm, or sociopathy, which shows a complete lack of empathy or compassion or identification. They don't understand it. They need to take fluids from you. They need to get some tissue samples from you. They need to understand you. This indicates sociopathy. I recently came across a post on Facebook, and it's in one of these CE5 groups, and somebody had a dream. They got sick. They got sick and had a fever and then had a crazy dream, and they wanted to know if they had met aliens, because the aliens in their crazy dream had said that they were studying our weapons explosions because they needed to understand it, and they, and I said, I can tell you right off the bat, that's not an ET, because the need to understand our, it shows a lack of identification, needing to understand how we think, what we do, that is a lack of identification. It's a lack of compassion. Now, it's one thing if they came to you, if they knocked on your door and asked, can I come in? And you said yes, and they sat down and they said, hey, we're very interested in this and that. Would it be okay? Do we have your permission? That would be one thing. But they take you by force, and then they do whatever they want, and then they, say, well, it's okay because we need to understand you. We need to investigate. We need to, This indicates sociopathy, a lack of identification, a lack of compassion, a lack of empathy. So anytime you're listening to anybody talking about ETs, UFOs, and that comes up, even if 90% of it they're talking about, it was this wonderful thing and they took me to another world and I flew on their ship and they showed me my son from another planet, and that if all that is there, and then there's anything in there that shows some lack of empathy or lack of understanding, you can disregard anything they've said as being connected to extraterrestrials. What it actually is, that is another discussion. Number 2, any activity that makes one human look more special, chosen, or spiritual than others, This is an indication of an inaccurate understanding of extraterrestrials. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but channeling, this is why I don't like channeling. I'm not, we'll get into that, but any person who says, for instance, we'll take somebody whose work I like, even though he claims to channel ETs, Bashar. I mean, I've made videos about, I like what Bashar teaches because he teaches really good stuff. When he's talking about how to manifest and all that, it's really good stuff. But the idea that the human, I forget his name, who channels Bashar, is the one chosen vessel for Bashar, what does it do? It turns him into somebody special. And you immediately see him as special. You see him as different. You see him as superior. Now, he may not act that way. But look, let's face it. That's why the guy, is able to make money off of this. That's why when he does his theatrics and he welcome to hit, he talks really strange and does weird stuff, that everybody erupts in laughter because now the real person is here. And this guy's channeling the real ET and the real knowledge and the real power. And it is devaluing to every human in there, every single human in that audience. Whenever you clap, that only this guy is magically able to hear this one ET who's speaking through him named Bashar. Whenever you clap for that, it means you don't value yourself. It means that you assume that you are less than him, and that you see him as a special chosen vessel. And it also, anyway, we'll get into that. But that anything that makes somebody look special or chosen, people who channel the Arcturians, anyway, we'll get into that. Anything like that, if you have that experience, you can throw away pretty much everything that they say. Because ETs don't function that way. They never make somebody else look more special than anybody else. Never. They never present themselves as being different or special. They never try to create this differentiation between, a good person, bad person, more spiritual, less spiritual. They don't do that. All right. So number 3, any activity that indicates alliance with human military or government organizations. So anytime you hear anything about UFOs, ETs, aliens that are allying with governments or the military, you can throw away everything that they say. Because ETs don't do that. ETs are not aligned with any government, because what does that mean? If they were to align with a government, by that act, they are saying these government officials are more important than you, the average person. And they don't see things like that. When they look at the world, they don't, take me to your leader. They don't think like that. Humans think like that. Because humans think that power comes from places it doesn't come from. ETs realize that, who are the people that have the most power? There's that naked sadhu in the mountains in the Himalayas that's never talked to more than 5 people in his life, and he meditates. They're going to go, that dude's powerful. They're going to go to him first. They're not going to go to the president of whatever ridiculous made-up country. Again, this is the false dark force people want you to believe in things like borders, governments, money, institutions, laws, banks. They want you to believe in that because that stuff doesn't exist. So the assumption that ETs are going to operate on that same level, it's an assumption. They don't. They operate from the truth of the power of vibration and consciousness. So they're going to be drawn to people who are more spiritually conscious. That's going to be the first people they're drawn to. So anytime you hear anything about ETs or aliens allying with military or allying with governments. And these ETs, the Draconians, are allied with the US military, but then there are the good Arcturians and they're allied with the... Whenever you hear anything like that, you can forget everything those people say, because ETs don't function that way. Number 4 assumption to look for that indicates false or inaccurate accounts of ETs. Number 4, any activity that indicates any danger to humans, animals, or planet Earth. So anytime somebody talks about ETs doing something, and if anything that they've done is going to causes harm to humans, is harmful in any way, harmful to animals, even to plant life, you can disregard. Now, I didn't used to, even after having had extensive experience with ETs, I had serious doubts about crop circles. And the reason I did was because it is possible for humans to create crop circles. It's very easy to do. And many people have. So that gave me enough pause to go, you know what, I don't know this is an ET thing or not. Because people could do it. Until I did some research and I found out that when people create crop circles, they destroy the plants. So it kills the plants and the plants can't grow. If a human, with a 2x4 and a rope and walking on it and smashing down, they break the stems and the stalks and it destroys the plants. And I just assumed that all crop circles, once a crop circle is created, it destroys the plants. But the interesting thing is that when people have gone in and studied crop circles, actual crop circles that I do believe were created by ETs, you find out that the plants have not been destroyed. Not only that, but the plants that have been, the part of the plants that have created the symbol, where the stalks have been bent over, it's been done in such a way that those plants actually, in a short period of time, go back up straight. They don't stay flat. They go back up straight, and they grow larger than the plants around them. And you find out that the energy signature on the places where the crop circles have been done is that it actually creates a better environment for the plants to grow. So you see, this proves it. I mean, that is when I said, now I know those are ETs, because I know ETs would never do anything to damage any plant, any human, any person. They have a reverence for Earth that it is a conscious being. I've made videos about that she's going to reincarnate into 5D, and we're going to have that. We're going to need to have that same love for her that the ETs do. So the ETs would never do anything that was, number one, against the desires of Mother Earth herself. They would never do anything to harm plants, animals, or any living conscious beings, and plants have consciousness. ETs would only, whenever they interact with any conscious beings, it is a rule, they only interact with them to the degree that it empowers them, that it helps them. So when I saw that there was scientific proof that where the crop circles, supposed ET crop circles have been created, that not only did the radiation in that area was helpful to life, not only that the crops eventually, given time, will go back up, they'll, even if they've been bent over, they'll go back straight again. And then those plants that were irradiated will actually be healthier and grow better. Then I knew it was real, because it goes along with my assumption, which I know to be true, which is that ETs never cause harm to any life ever. So anytime that you hear any activity about UFOs that indicates any danger to humans, animals, or planet Earth itself, you can throw away whatever those people are saying, because they don't know the true assumptions about what ETs are. All right, so now that we've gone through all the false assumptions about ETs and UFOs, let's go to conflations. So some common conflations and falsehoods about ETs. I've already started talking about abductions. Abductions do happen. So what is conflation? Conflation is when you have something, somebody talks about something and part of it is true and part of it is false, but it's been mixed together. Want to lie to you, manipulate you, steal from you, they will consciously conflate. People who have emotional attachments, unconscious emotional attachments, coming from fear, anger, insecurity, they unconsciously conflate because they're looking to justify their false assumption on reality. So they need their victim mentality or whatever it is, and so they will conflate in order to preserve their false assumption. Because if you talk them out of their false assumption, they feel like it's a threat to them. This is why people don't want to give, this is why, religious people don't want to give up on their false religion. This is why, by the way, people are so into Gnosticism, who say, I don't believe in Jesus, but I believe in the true Jesus, which is the Gnostic Jesus. This is called conflation. They have a need to believe in Jesus, but they don't want to believe in the one that sends you to hell. So they believe in the one that'll save you, but it's coming from a need to be saved. It's coming from insecurity. And so they conflate. They don't realize they're doing it, but they have an emotional attachment. So when I come along and I say, Jesus never existed and I can prove it to you, they go, no, that's the false Jesus. We're talking about the real one, the real historical one that the church tries to destroy. This is somebody who can't let go of the concept of being saved. It's so frightening to them to let go of that they have to conflate. They have to create a new one. And then they say, no, this is the original. That's a good example of how people conflate unconsciously. They can't help it because they have to hold on to their emotional attachments. So, abductions. Let me just tell you what abductions are. Abductions do happen. They are a real thing, very real thing. Not everybody who claims to be abducted has been abducted. There are people who are lying to you, because there's a lot of money in lying about being abducted. There are people who are delusional, who have mental problems, who have concoct things in their mind, or have this serious break from reality, and they can't tell the difference between their fantasies and reality. So those people do exist. They claim to have been abducted, and they have not been. But then there are people who have been abducted. And I don't know how many. There are many, many, many of them. There are people well-known people. Whitley Strieber is one of them. I absolutely believe that Whitley Strieber has been abducted. I believe that all of the things he writes about in his books and in his movies, that did happen to him. But the question is, who abducted him? So again, in order to know right off the bat that abductions are a common conflation and falsehood about ETs, ETs never, under any circumstances, will ever do anything against your will, ever. They will never cause you harm, psychological, physical, mental, emotional, and they will never do anything that goes against even the slightest discomfort. This is why sometimes people have difficulty with CE5 or interdimensional meditation. Because you're holding on to some fear. And it's okay to be afraid. I have had fear. I still have fear, if I'm being honest with you. But I have enough consciousness to know that I want to have this experience that fear doesn't hold me back. But if you're really holding on to your fear and you really believe that they're going to cause you harm, or if you don't want, they're not going to come anywhere near you. You know, sometimes, very rarely, sometimes they might just sort of kind of see if you're open to them. One guy, again, on a CE5 Facebook group was proud of this. And he said that he saw, I know for a fact because I've seen this same craft or style of craft, he saw a red orb fly into, you know, not too far, but in, you know, visual distance, and he flipped it off and it just took off. Because the moment that you show any sign that you don't want them around, they're gone. They're history. So if you know that about them, you know that they can't abduct anybody. It's impossible. So that is a common falsehood. And again, as I said before, people who get abducted, they get into Stockholm syndrome, which happens when you're abused, especially with abusers that give you confusing experiences, like they will be kind to you and loving to you, and then they will tie you up and experiment on you, or tie you up and abuse you, or they'll force their telepathic messages onto you, and then they'll be loving to you and kind to you and pretend. That is a very common tactic of abusers, and it's very easy for people who've been abducted out of a need to survive and understand, will conflate and turn it into something that it isn't. Whereas if the whole time that it's happening, if a human is actually there doing everything that you hear happening in an abduction, there's a far greater chance that the abductee is going to not bond with you. They're going to know that you're a very powerful, psychotic human being with a lot of technology, and that's as far as it'll go. But if you bring in an ET android that either has AI or is being remotely controlled, and also has software and things like that where it can send telepathic messages to you, if you bring that in, which is what happened during the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, then people are far more likely to accept it and allow it into them and allow it to conflate and create the Stockholm syndrome trauma attachment, because they actually believe it's not a human being that's doing it. So all those other things, these beings don't understand us, they're more evolved than we are, they don't have souls like we do, so they can't help it. Okay, I'm not going to judge them. This is a good thing. Maybe there's a spiritual reason why I'm being abducted and abused. But if you know that it's human beings happen from A to Z and that they just have a lot more power than you, you're a lot less likely to buy into it and allow it to become part of you. So, medical experiments, implants. So medical experiments, and again, people want to, as I talked about before, they think that these beings need to somehow test us. They need to look at our whatever. They need to heal their own, dying race or some other nonsense like that, which none of that is true. If you interact with ETs, you find out very quick that they're so connected to source that there's no way that their planet is going to die and their species dying and they need to hybridize with humans. You're going to know right off the bat once you interact with them that that is an impossibility in higher dimensions. Nothing like that ever happens. If a planet ends up, being destroyed, the ETs will not only know so far in advance that it's happening, but they themselves will be part of the decision making to do that. They will have already set up ways to evolve into a higher level of being or something like that. And I'm just saying that's how that would work out. I don't know for a fact that that's happened. I'm trying to get through this as quickly as possible. So medical experiments, implants. I talk about implants in interdimensional revolution, and I prove to you that implants are not done by ETs, they're done by humans. And the way that I can very simply do that is implants used to be a really big thing in the 80s. There are people still alive today, and you find them on CE5 Facebook groups who have pictures of where they were implanted. They might even have a picture of the implant itself. And usually what happens is they get when they're abducted against their will, they're experimented on against their will, and they get implanted with something. they're doing stuff like implanting in brains, you know. But way back in the 80s, they would just like implant on your arm or on your leg or on your foot or something like that. And then what would happen is it would get infected. And then the person would go to the doctor, and the doctor would go, "What is this?" And they would say, "I don't know." And then they would pull out some strange beings experimenting with implants. It would be a far different experience for them. If somebody said to them the truth, which is that there's, you know, a whole level of technological advancements that are going on far beyond what you understand. And one of them is implanting humans with devices so that we can track you, control you, right? You would not at all make it into some cool thing. You would see that for what it is. But the way that you know that implants come from humans is because, again, back in the 80s, this is when implants were a big deal. Back in the 1980s, humans didn't have technology for implants. If they did, they would have been big enough that you would see them. You would be able to pick them up, you know, and if you were to implant something into somebody, it would obviously be something like a microchip or something that I could hold in my hand. That's the level of technology that humans had back then. So back then, the idea that something this big being implanted in your brain or implanted that sounded so science fiction-y to us back in the 1980s that we had no problem accepting that it must be aliens doing it because we don't have the technology to do that. But then you think to yourself, all right, so what we're talking about here is we're talking about supposed aliens from other planets who have traveled hundreds or thousands or millions of light years to get to Earth. They have mastered anti-gravity. They go faster than the speed of light, faster than the speed of sound. They have all of this unbelievable technology, but for some reason, they have to implant something in you so that they can track you. Which, by the way, I mean, humans we don't need to do that. I don't have my cell phone here, but you're being tracked right now. During lockdown, I was here in Australia, and there was a neighbor who had, you know, and during lockdown, you weren't allowed to have more than one guest besides the family living there. You could have one guest, and that was it. And there was a guy who was having 10 people over. And he was very quiet about it because he didn't want the cops to come because if he made noise. So there were just 10 people there just quietly watching TV and socializing. And they get a knock on the door. It was the cops. And the cops are saying, you got to send these people home. So he sends the people home. And then he says to the cops, how did you know these people were here? And the cop says, oh, we can monitor all of the cell phone signals and we can tell if it's a cell phone of a resident or not. So they were all monitoring. So we now have the ability to monitor people without using implants. We didn't have that in the 1980s. So the assumption is that ETs needed to implant human beings so that they could monitor them and track them. And the idea of doing that now is absolutely absurd. It is such primitive technology to track somebody that way. We wouldn't do that. So at the time it sounded like science fiction, but when you look back on in hindsight, what makes more sense? Beings who are traveling trillions of light years to get to you, but can't figure out how to track you, so they have to put a big bulky metal thing into you? And they have to experiment on you and take you captive to do that? Or does that sound like humans in the 1980s learning how to create implants and experimenting on humans with implants? Because now we know, it's well known, everybody knows this, that you can put nanotechnology into humans and track them. There are people that are volunteering to have little tiny things the size of smaller than a grain of rice put in them so that they can be tracked. We know that. And that, having some kind of tracking device smaller than a grain of rice, that in the 1980s would have blown our minds. But the assumption is, when you look back on it, Was it ETs implanting people, or was it humans experimenting? The obvious answer is that it was humans. So anytime you hear somebody talk about implants, you know it has nothing to do with ETs. It has to do with humans abducting and experimenting. Animal mutilations, that's not a big thing now. That was a big thing again back in the 80s. People were getting abducted and animals were being mutilated in ways, and the scientists were saying it's impossible for this to happen. You know, there's this strange radiation about the blah, blah, and so people, oh my God, technology beyond what we can understand. It must be aliens. No, it's humans. Humans experimenting with technology and trying to frighten you, because part of what humans want to do is frighten you so that you will not want to actually interact with the true extraterrestrials who have the power to help you awaken to who you are, which means you won't be able to be controlled. So frightening people with stories of abductions and frightening people with cattle mutilations and other things like that, that's a great way to keep people in control. And if you hear that, it's not aliens, it's humans. That's not a big thing now. It was a big thing a while ago. Human-alien hybrid programs. This is a real thing. Notice I didn't say human ET hybrid programs. There is no such thing as extraterrestrial human hybrid programs. They don't exist. And that is because once you experience a higher dimensional being, you know right off the bat these beings have no need or desire to create some human ET hybrid. But again, what are aliens? As I've said before, the word alien means different. And the word alien, when you think of aliens, you think of these kinds of things. And if you look at this picture, what do you see? You see a sociopathic, psychopathic being that wants to harm you, that does not have empathy for you, that does not relate to you, that does not understand you, that does not identify with you, that doesn't have a soul. It wants to feed off of you. It wants to experiment on you. That's what you see when you look at that. That is an alien, because alien means different. The first word for psychologists who dealt with mental illness was an alienist, somebody who studied people who were different, who were alien. Aliens exist. Any being that acts with sociopathy, psychopathy, that doesn't respect your boundaries, that doesn't love you, that doesn't empathize with you, that does things to you without your permission, which creates a trauma bond by love bombing you in one moment and then abusing you in the next, where you never know where you stand, and you say, well, that's okay, they're just different and beyond us and they're not like us, so we can't project human values onto them because they're from another planet. It's all bullshit. Complete, total nonsense. Alien abductions happen because any person that abducts, whether it's a Hamas terrorist abducting civilians to get what they want, or if it's some being that looks like this and takes you hostage onto their ship, that is an alien. Now, are aliens from extraterrestrial planets? No, because all conscious beings everywhere in the universe, regardless of what planet they're from, even if their thinking is different, they will have an emotional, psychological root to them that will be identical, because consciousness is the same everywhere. Consciousness is love. The root of consciousness and self-awareness is love. Love of self and love of others, which means compassion, empathy. And that is not alien. That is the same. That is us. You know, effective, there is no difference. So I use the word alien very specifically. Alien abductions do occur, but they're done in the third dimension on Earth by humans. Aliens are the servants of human beings. ETs are not. All right, so human alien hybrid programs. Um, there have been no shortage of actual extraterrestrial craft that have been shot down. They aren't crashes. So again, you're being lied to when David Grush says that there is a hidden military UFO retrieval program. Because the assumption of that is that they're waiting for some UFO to, whoops, crash. We're talking about a piece of technology and beings who are controlling this technology that has gone hundreds, millions, or trillions of light years to get here. And for some reason, they crashed. Oops. Yeah, a lightning bolt struck it. Oops. I mean, you know, we have planes that fly through lightning. They don't crash. But somehow these extremely advanced beings who've come here trillions of light years, what ended up happening? Well, they hit some kind of weird weather event and they crashed. No. They were shot down. Human beings have the ability and have had the ability since at least World War II, have had the ability to shoot down extraterrestrial crafts, and they do that to steal. They do that to steal technology, and there have been extraterrestrial dead corpses as a result. So humans have retrieved these corpses, have experimented on them, and they have learned how to take their DNA, and they are still trying to hybridize. So when you hear stories about people who have been abducted, like women who have been abducted, impregnated, and then have their fetuses taken from them when they get abducted again, and then they're abducted and shown their, you know, alien human children, that is a real thing. And when you hear stories about these alien human children, they don't look healthy. They will look a lot like this being, the cross between this being and a human, and they'll have scraggly hair, and they will be very frightened and very jumpy. What happens when you take a wolf and you hybridize it with a dog? Anybody who's had any experience with this knows you end up with a very unpredictable, unhappy, jumpy animal. It doesn't know whether it's a dog or a wolf, and you're better off having a wolf than having a wolf dog, because wolf dogs are very unpredictable. And this is because you're hybridizing two species that have enough similarities that they can breed, but not enough that you end up with a cohesive, you know, psyche in that being. So is there an alien human hybrid program? Yes. And it's being done by humans. Remember, aliens are third dimensional created beings or robots or who knows what else, AI beings that are the servants of human beings. And these humans do have the bodies of actual extraterrestrials that they have shot down in cold blood in combat, and they are trying to create super soldier humans. This is a real thing, but it's not done by ETs. And it's very sad, and I think it's just a horrific crime against consciousness in general. It's horrific to know that this is going on, but it is. Don't believe me? Listen to the 1,000 whistleblowers that Dr. Stephen Greer has, who have come from these programs and have seen these laboratories where there have been alien human hybrids. Human beings are trying to create this. Do some research in the real ufology, not in the fake nonsense that's out there. What other conflations? Super Soldier Program. All right, this is an interesting one. Very interesting. It makes for a really good science fiction movie, and I'm not opposed to this kind of very bizarre possibility, except that when you look at it, you find that it follows the assumptions that disprove it. Super Soldier Program says that there's this human military secret program where, because of some interdimensional technology, they have the ability to take children when they're sleeping and to take them out of their beds and take them in time, forward in time, backward in time, whatever. Take them in time out of their 3D timeline and put them in another timeline, and then for 20 years they will train them to be these super soldiers. They will take them to Mars, and on Mars, according to this, there is some facility where humans are taken and they're trained to be these super space soldiers where they can battle ETs and, you know, things like that, and fly planes and who knows whatever else. And so at the end of their 20-year run of doing this work, then they will be sent back in time to another timeline, back to where they came from, and their experience will be that they will wake up the next morning and remember, or maybe in a few days they'll remember what went on for those past 20 years. And one of the guys who promotes this is a guy named Corey Goode. And Corey Goode has already on video admitted that he made it all up. And he was doing it to make money so he could write books and write comic books and movies and things like that. And because of that, when he was pressed on it, he admitted that he made it all up. So right there, you know that it's not a real thing, but people really want to believe it. And the thing about it is that in that belief system, you are training to be a soldier, and that there's this warfare between good and bad aliens, that there's these evil Draconians who are blah, 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 and they're fighting against the humans, and then there are the good aliens that are fighting with humans against the evil Draconians. And this goes against the assumptions that I've said. There's no such thing as ETs fighting with each other, because the only ETs that are here are ETs that are from a higher dimension. Now, there are some things that, again, you hear some conflations, and this is why it gets challenging, because in this same belief about super soldiers is some truth, which is that humans are not allowed to travel beyond our solar system. And they say the reason that is because in the Kuiper belt surrounding the solar system are the evil Draconians. And the Draconians are more advanced and more powerful than human beings, but they're very evil. They're reptilian, evil beings, and they, you know, if there's anybody that's forcing you to come back so they can suck out the life force, it's these evil Draconians that live out in the Kuiper belt, and they have basically created a wall so that nothing can get out of our solar system, and that human beings are not allowed beyond our solar system. So the truth is that is true. We do have the ability, we have had the ability. There is a secret space program. There are UFOs, spacecraft that human beings have created. I think it was the CEO of Raytheon has said openly that everything that you see on Star Trek and Star Wars, we've already done, and we've gone far beyond that, which means we have the capability of going interstellar if we want. But ETs, higher dimensional ETs, will not allow humans beyond their solar system. And that is true. But it's not because there's evil Draconians out there stopping it. It's because these guys know that the human beings in this secret space program, if you let them, they will go and start crap with, innocent other extraterrestrial civilizations that don't know anything about violence. That if you interact with them, their assumption is that you are a loving, kind being, and they'll say, yeah, come on in. And the next thing you know, Humans will have, devastated, destroyed, killed, stolen. So humans are not allowed outside of our solar system. That part is true. But there's no evil draconians. There's no evil draconians. In fact, I've been interacting with ETs for a long time, and I have interacted with more species than I can count. And all different kinds of species. Literally cat people. There are cat people. I'm not kidding you. There are beings that look like humans, exactly like humans. For all I know, they are humans. There are beings that look a lot like the being behind me. There are beings that look like this, but not so mean and angry. There are beings that look like little dwarves. There's these moon people that look like me. They're bald, but they're really short, and they have like this white skin, not like white like human white, but white like that. I mean, like China looking white. And they wear these turtlenecks. I don't know why, but they have this thing about turtlenecks, and they're short. And they're very happy people, and they're very wonderful, happy people. All different kinds of species. I've never once run into a draconian lizard person. I wouldn't have a problem. I don't have any prejudice against any species. I know that there are insectoids out there, that there are mantis beings out there, and probably other kinds of insectoids. I know that I know that there are snake ETs that look exactly like cobras. In fact, our cobras came from them. They created those cobras to remind us of them. So there's all kinds of crazy things. There are reptilians, but they're cobra naga beings. They're not evil in the slightest. They're the greatest friends to human beings that you could have. But I've never once run into a lizard reptilian. Doesn't mean they don't exist. I just haven't run into them. But even if they do exist, again, follow the assumptions. If they've come to Earth, they're higher dimensional. That is an assumption you can accept. If they're at a higher dimension, regardless of what kind of species they operate from the law of love. They identify with their soul, with love, and they identify with your soul. Doesn't matter what species they are. So, sorry, there's no evil draconians running our universe. ET walk-ins. This is one of my favorite things to debunk because it has such victim mentality and trauma-based assumptions behind it. So an ET walk-in. So these are people who usually will claim to be some kind of channeler. And what they say is that some ET consciousness has come into their body and that they share their consciousness with another conscious being. Hence, walk in, like this being has walked into their body. These people tend to promote themselves as walk-ins. They tend to promote themselves as channels of ET. And again, channelers by definition make themselves superior because I am the representative of so-and-so. And I channeled the being such and such. And I have a dual, And again, what we're talking about here is either somebody who is lying or somebody who is, if they honestly do believe it and they experience themselves having another personality, we're talking about somebody with a very serious mental illness. At the very least, multiple personality syndrome. So, and the reason why I say that is because ETs do not ever do anything to violate your boundaries. That includes your physical boundaries. They will never do that. Even if you ask an ET to come and live inside of me, they won't do it. Now, that's not the same as connecting with spirits and merging, as I've talked about in here. One of the things that the Taoists do is they They meditate, and deities will come and live in different parts of the brain, but we're talking about deities. We're not talking about actual beings, conscious, physical beings that have their own, experience in, lower dimensions, meaning fifth, sixth. Those beings have no interest in taking up space within you. And moreover, they have no interest in bringing attention to you in such a way where you end up being different and special and odd and whatever. So this whole idea of walk-ins, what you're talking about here is, we're talking about people who have very serious damaged psyches and very damaged identities, and they want some other identity to come in. It also sounds exactly like possession, and the beings that possess you are called demons. So ETs are not demons. So you can get rid of that whole walk-in thing. That doesn't exist. ET channeled messages and ET channelers. So let me talk about that. I wrote down something. I'm just going to read through it. If I can find it, that is. That's not it. That's not it. I might not be able to find it. Which wouldn't be... Is this it? Yeah, here we go. All right, so let me read what I wrote, because I wrote a lot of stuff about channeling. All right, so first let me say, is it possible to channel an ET? I'm not going to say it's not possible. And the reason for that is because it's kind of a gray area, because my experience with ETs is that almost all the time they communicate to you, they're communicating to you telepathically. So I've talked about that. I've wrote about it in my books. It's a very strange and interesting experience, and it's a very intimate experience, but that's how they communicate. They communicate telepathically. So does that mean, would it be impossible for me to sit there, and if I felt like I was getting an energy transmission, close my eyes and then say what's coming to me? Yes, that is a possible thing. Could you call that channeling? Yeah. But it's incredibly iffy, because I've only seen one person do that. They didn't claim to be channeling ETs, but they were channeling, and I've seen one person do that, where they'll close their eyes and they'll just say a few words, and then they'll repeat the words that they were just saying, because they were translating something that was coming to them. That doesn't mean I think that person is channeling. So let me just read what I wrote. Channeling is very iffy. While it is true that ETs primarily communicate to humans through telepathic communication, the idea that someone is a channel for another consciousness is a very egocentric dynamic. ETs do not play favorites and do not seek to make anyone more special than another. The vast majority of channeled messages are so generalized and hyper-spiritualized and of a superficial nature that anyone can say them and not be wrong. Go on to YouTube and click on any video that says Arcturian channeled message. The messages are going to be, we are the Arcturians, and focus on your whatever. Focus on your soul, and light being this, and frequency of love, and we are here, and you're going through a challenge, and it's all so general. And there's nothing wrong with those messages, inspirational messages of just focus on the light, and I give those kind of messages all the time. But when you're doing it in this thing where you're channeling the Arcturian, I mean, there's so much ego involved in there, and the whole thing is designed to make you look special so that a bunch of people will come and listen to you. And I'm telling you that ETs just have no interest in that dynamic. They will not be part of that. The messages are of such a common sense nature that they have almost no practical value. The messages are only useful as inspirational, superficial gobbledygook. The only result of channeling is for someone to make themselves look more spiritual and chosen than other people, being chosen by a specific ET or group of ETs that name themselves. That's another one. we are the Arcturians, or we are the blah blah, and I'm channeling that. Whenever you use those big names again, it puts a lot of clout on you and what you're saying. Now, let me be clear. I've interacted with councils. I've interacted with councils, the Council of Three, Council of Five, the Council of Nine, the Council of 12. I've interacted with so-and-so, you know, the deity of such and such galaxy. So it's not that they don't have titles and there aren't, you know, groups of beings that function and work together and communicate to you. It's that whatever they come to say is going to be for you. They're not like God, who's giving you a message so that you can go out and be a prophet. They don't do that. They've never done that with me. I can't imagine why they would. I don't like it for all those reasons. I don't like hearing and seeing and feeling all of that egocentric nonsense when people claim to be channeling. And my experience with ETs is that they also don't do that. And it's because it's damaging to you. This whole idea of channeling is devaluing of yourself. If you're listening to the channeler, you're devaluing yourself because you're saying, I don't have the ability to tap into this spiritual wisdom. If you're the one being the channel, you're devaluing yourself because you're not saying, here's my thoughts, here's my feelings, here's my experience. You're saying, no, it's coming from them. And, you know, it's like the gospel truth, you know, the Holy Spirit is talking from, it devalues you every time you do that. So that's why I don't like it, and I believe they don't like it for the same reason. Lastly, channeling is just a euphemism for possession. ETs do not possess anyone ever. It goes against their morality, which is they always respect people's boundaries and free will. All right. So let's see, what else? What else? I'm almost through my list here. I usually make my list too long. Evil, draconian, reptilian aliens. All right, we've already talked about it a little bit. These beings do not exist. Let me read to you what I wrote because it's very appropriate. So, draconian reptilian overlords. These beings do not exist. They were invented by Zecharia Sitchin. If you don't know who he is, go look him up. Zecharia Sitchin, last name Sitchin. This guy invented the whole Anunnaki alien, he made all that up. He, back then when he was writing in the 70s, there wasn't a lot of access to translations of Sumerian, and so he just fudged his way through it. He said he was this expert in Sumerian, and he wasn't. And he mistranslated all kinds of stuff and wrote a bunch of books, and it was all BS, bullshit, nonsense, science fiction garbage. All of it. And unfortunately, it allied itself really well with the abduction scenario. Because you believe if there are these beings who are abducting you and experimenting on you, and you believe this nonsense story that there were these aliens who came to Earth and conquered Earth and then created humans with what? Alien-human hybrid programming, and used them as slaves, and it buys into everybody's three-dimensional experience of being controlled and trapped and all of that, and it works really well. It's a really good way to sell books, and it became the mainstay. So much so that people don't even know that the whole Anunnaki thing was created by this science fiction writer. People don't even know that. I mean, there's, the History Channel, for Christ's sake, has ancient aliens and people talking about Anunnakis and, talking about the Sumerian this, and they don't even know that they're mistranslating Sumerian. That's really sad. So this whole idea of draconian reptilian overlords were these reptilian beings from the Draconis system. How convenient is that? It looks like a dragon from here. Oh, but when you get to their planet, they are dragons. Oh my God, that's such a coincidence. No, it's a childish, immature, association. That's all it is. We're talking about little children. creating little frightened fantasies. So this was appropriated by Zecharia Sitchin when he invented the whole Anunnaki alien fiction, and this idea was then appropriated by David Icke, who then, again, I've talked about David Icke. David Icke, he started after being a sports figure. He then went and tried to tell the world that he was the second coming of Jesus. He made some predictions that didn't come true, including New Zealand falling into the ocean. When those predictions didn't come true, he rewrote himself and started talking about this, and he definitely appropriated Zecharia Sitchin's Anunnaki, evil, reptilian, alien stuff. And it's, again, because it appeals to people's fear and their three-dimensional understandings and all this stuff that I've said, it's taken traction, but it's pure nonsense. I personally have never encountered any reptilians other than the Nagas, who are extremely beneficent servants of humanity. If there are reptilian lizard ETs interacting with Earth, they would be higher dimensional beings, and they would interact with us the same way all higher dimensional beings do. What else? What's the next one? We're almost done here. Number 9, evil interdimensional aliens. You know, when I talk about I interact with higher dimensional beings, interdimensional beings, every now and then I'll get a comment on the channel from somebody who says, there's obviously some, like, I think Christian thing, or people who are afraid of ETs or buy into that, who have somehow decided that any being that's interdimensional is evil. And anybody who talks like this doesn't understand dimensions. Now, it's true about lower dimensional beings, demons, lower spirits, ghosts. Any entity that comes from the second dimension up into the third is a very, very nasty being. You don't want to get anywhere near that, because the vibration of the second dimension, there is no love. It is just pure violence and greed, and and you know, that's why demons are, you know, if you call something a demon, they are destructive by definition, because they come from the second dimension. So if somebody thinks that a higher dimensional being can operate that way, again, they don't understand the whole idea of the law of frequency. And love is a frequency. Hatred is a frequency. Fear is a frequency. So you can't have a higher dimensional being be evil. And I think, again, the conflation is happening because, again, people haven't experienced higher dimensions. So the moment somebody starts saying, oh, you interact with interdimensionals, oh, you're talking to demons and blah, 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 they don't have any idea what dimensions are all about. So I've talked about that ad infinitum. I'm going to talk about a couple more things really quickly. UFO and alien whistleblowers working with mainstream media and reporters are almost certainly deep state agents of misinformation. David Drush, whether he's a willing or unknowing plant, he is an agent of misinformation simply because he wants you to believe that there is a secret government program of UFO crash retrievals. And to get you thinking along those terms, again, makes you think that ETs somehow can't handle their own ship and crash into a mountain, or they don't want you to know that every alien that's crashed has been shot down, and they don't want you to know that human beings have the power. The whole idea of the UFO retrieval program, the whole idea is to spread the misinformation that ETs are a military threat to humans. That's what that whole thing is about. So anytime you hear anybody talking about anything having to do with UFOs on mainstream media, almost certainly that is a deep state agent of misinformation. There are two types of misinformation agents. There are the ones that are obvious guys. Now, there's a few other guys, and I don't remember their names. There's one guy that disappeared because he got thrown under the bus. Elizondo, I guess his last name was. And he was one of these guys that would go on and talk about it, and he was really big on saying that ETs were a threat. And for some reason, he had a bug up his ass about Dr. Greer. Why he would, I don't know, but he had a bug up his ass, and he was one of these guys that was saying that only ex-military should be talking about UFOs, that you and me, we shouldn't be allowed to go and talk about UFOs because we don't have the appropriate experience. Who talks like that? Obviously, these people who are ex-military going all over mainstream media and supposedly spilling these secrets about these deep state military programs, and they're not ending up dead in a ditch somewhere, that right there tells you something's wrong. So the first type of misinformation agent is the obvious one. They are spies, they're plants, they're liars, they're con men. The second type of misinformation agent is the unknowing. These are people who innocently are coming forth and spewing misinformation, but they think they're revealing the truth to you. I've got two examples. One is Linda Moulton Howe. I don't know the woman. I'm sure she's a perfectly wonderful person. But for decades, she has been reporting on UFOs and aliens, and she gets if not all of her information, the majority of her information comes from these ex-military whistleblowers. And I told you the story about the one that she was so excited about that proved this stuff about aliens because this guy was ex-military. And the whole thing was that it was a human-created alien-looking robot, and they were experimenting on its ability to telepathically send messages to people, and they almost killed a guy. And they literally, this robot came waddling out of a UFO, and the military guys said, "Oh, well, that's because they're not used to walking on our gravity. They're used to levitating. So we're going to make him walk so that you won't get freaked out. But he's not going to look. He's going to waddle. So just be aware of that." And then they said, and then he's going to send you messages to your brain, which will knock you out and it might kill you. But they're going to give us a lot of information, and then we're going to debrief you. And of course, this is obviously military experimentation, but because she heard it from some guy who was ex-military, she spews it out there like it's the truth, and doesn't even enter her mind that she might be giving out misinformation. She is obviously an unknowing person, and the reason is, she's been doing it since the 70s, and that's not her fault. All this stuff was, I would have believed it that way myself, but that is an unknowing agent of misinformation. Another well-known unknowing agent of misinformation, in my opinion, is Whitley Strieber. Whitley Strieber and his movies and his books, I believe he was targeted because he was a writer. And as I said before, lots of times people who are abducted are told that they're special. Now, don't get that conflated with ETs that actually tell you you're special. But an ET telling you that you're special and unique and beautiful is the same kind of thing that they tell anybody. Now, you and I might be told different things about our specific knowledge and abilities and all of that, but we will both be given that same feeling that when they talk to us, you are special in this way. When it's done by humans, they do it in a narcissistic way where they separate you out. And again, Whitley Strieber writes in his book that he was chosen because of his unique brain, and he's different. And that creates that egocentric, weird thing where the special people. And then another thing is when people get abducted and they get sexually abused and they are used for this breeding program, they tell themselves again, it feeds their narcissism and their ego and their victim mentality, because victims try to make themselves look special. How do I know this? All you have to do is go on YouTube and type in chosen ones. You will see no shortage of videos that are obviously talking to extremely damaged people who want to feel special. They don't just want to be normal and loved like a normal person. They want to be special. They're so special that God has chosen them. And just like Jesus, who was betrayed and hung on a cross and martyred, you're like that too. And that's how you know God has chosen you, because you've gone through all this horrible garbage in your life and you're so screwed up. That's how you know God loves you. This is obviously coming from people's insecurity. So whenever you hear, again, and Whitley Strieber, as much as I respect him as a writer, I absolutely believe he's been abused by dark force humans, and he's been told that he's special because of his brain. That's why they're taking his semen and creating hybrids from him and all that other crazy nonsense. So those are the two kinds, knowing and unknowing. The only well-known ET contactee expert that I trust in terms of knowing at least the truth is Dr. Stephen Greer. I don't see him, I don't believe him because I just believe what he says. I believe him because I have scrutinized what he says, and it absolutely reflects my experience with ETs. Now, I've had experiences that go far beyond what he's ever talked about, but that doesn't mean he hasn't had similar experiences. He's got a specific focus and he tries to stay there. But it's also possible he's never experienced the things that I've experienced. So it's not like I worship the guy. But I think it's important to understand that if you want to know the truth, find people who understand these assumptions. Either they intuitively follow these assumptions, like Stephen Greer does, that these beings are at a higher dimension, it's impossible for them to cause you pain and harm. They only operate for what's the benefit of humanity and all of that. And he knows that from personal experience, like I know. So listen for that. Let's see. Here's a question I have for people who are ufologists. Why aren't more CE5 contactees seen by most ufologists as experts? If you go to a UFO conference, you're not going to see any CE5 people up there. I mean, I went to, the only UFO meeting I ever went to, I was one of the speakers and the other speaker was a contactee. But for the most part, when you go to UFO conferences, the people that you're listening to are going to be abductees. And it's interesting because I've interacted with these ufologists. And and especially ones that want to spiritualize abduction. And I say, ETs don't abduct, humans do that. And it's interesting how much resistance there is. So much so that one guy, this ufologist, I assume he makes good money going around to these ufology conferences and writing his books. He said, it's too extensive. Human beings can't possibly be doing all these abductions. Look at how many people got the... I mean, it's an assumption that there isn't a very powerful deep state running the world. If you don't believe that, go ahead and believe in abductions are coming from ETs. Completely up to you. So I find that interesting. I don't like ufology conferences. I don't like ufology books. I don't like ufology movies because they tend to be people who are into the whole sci-fi aspect, who really get off on the victim mentality, the fear, and aren't interested. And many of these people have never done CE5 and don't do CE5. And many of these ufologists badmouth Dr. Greer, who has 1,000 whistleblowers who can tell you what the real secret space program is, but instead they go buy books from Corey Goode who talk about being a super soldier and being pulled out of one timeline into another and going on Mars and fighting aliens, and then coming, this is the ufology crowd, and unfortunately it's all over the place, and I wish there was something we could do to get rid of this nonsense. But I guess people have to do what they have to do. The last thing I'm going to say is that actual deep contact experience with ETs is so bizarre. It is so beyond the third dimension that it is very difficult, if not impossible, to even begin to understand. And so I understand that when I start talking about the interdimensional aspect of it, that it's going to turn people off and frighten them. In fact, there are people that when I've begun to talk about it that get so flipped out by me that they want nothing to do with me after that. They're so freaked out. Same people who would be happy to believe in aliens abducting you, by the way. And that is because deep contact with ETs will destroy your experience with the third dimension, and it will empower you more towards ascending to a higher dimensional level. As we talked about before, the third dimension, that is a mind that is in the third dimension, their first experience of higher dimension will cause them fear. So it's understandable that people are afraid of this. But again, if you want to know what real extraterrestrial experience is like, it is so bizarre, it is so beyond human comprehension that you must experience it. So the last thing that I want to say is, there's other things I could say, but I won't take up any more of your time. The last thing I want to say is, did I write it here? No. Do not take my word for anything. I'm not looking for you to just believe what I say just because I said it. I want to encourage you to experience it for yourself. When you do, you'll know what I'm talking about. You'll know I'm talking the truth, because I'm not making this up. I'm talking from direct experience, but you won't know if my experience is true if you don't have those experiences. Go and go do CE5, do on this channel the guided interdimensional meditations. Keep doing it. If you don't have success at first, it just means that there's a really thick 3D barrier that you're going to have to work your way through. But if you keep doing CE5, if you keep doing interdimensional meditation on a regular basis, you will eventually have some experiences that will empower you, that will shift you. I guarantee it. You're going to have to face your fears and your limitations and a lot of 3D human stuff that's going to be challenging. But I guarantee you, if you do the work, it'll pay off. I wish everybody on the planet was doing interdimensional meditation. It would be a completely different world. So with that, I will end the lecture portion of it. I'm going to take a look and see if there are any questions I want to answer. Again, as I said before, the majority of questions are going to be answered if you read my books and do the practices I teach and spend time on my channel. If I like your question, I will look at it. If I don't like your question and I tell you something you don't want to hear, don't get your feelings hurt. I warned you ahead of time. I don't read comments. Atlantic Marketing, I don't know if you're subscribed to the 90-day challenge at thunderwizard.com, but I'll read your question, see if I want to answer it. All right, I'm going to answer this question because it's an interesting question, and it doesn't mean I know the answer to it, but I'm going to read it. Have you experienced AI sending signals through household technologies? No, because I don't have things like Alexa. I would never have one of those things in my house. I have, I have my computer and I have my phone, and that's it. But I haven't experienced it. Is it possible they have? I wouldn't doubt it. I do think people give AI far too much power than it has. I don't think AI really is conscious. I think it's pretending to be conscious because we've programmed it to pretend to be conscious, but it's not. It's obvious. I've played around with AI scripts myself, and it's obvious that there's no real consciousness behind it. It's just a program going online and trying to grab things. I tried to make, somebody said you can make videos. So I tried using AI to make videos, and all it did was it took the same stuff it got off the internet and just kept repeating itself over and over again. And I saw that it had no idea what it was doing. I don't think AI is what people are afraid it is. Doesn't mean that it's not a problem, that it's not potentially damaging, and it's not a tool that can be used in all kinds of negative ways. I just don't think it's going to wake up one day and take over the world. This person says, it seems as if some negative interdimensional beings, so this is an assumption that AI has a connection with negative interdimensional beings, and I talked about it. So you're proving my point. There are people out there that think that interdimensional means negative and all that. No, AI doesn't have the ability to tap into lower dimensional demons or anything like that. I don't believe that. I think this is your projection. Anyway. I think that Atlantic Marketing, I encourage you to take a look at some of your fear. I think you got some fear there that is allowing you to have an emotional attachment, which is helping you to conflate some understandings that aren't true. Now, I did clickbait, so it's not your fault. It's an early question. I did clickbait with this. This is obvious clickbait to get people to click on the video, and I know a lot of people wanting to hear about evil draconians and alien human hybrids are going to be disappointed when I say that it's not what they've been told it is. So it's not your fault for thinking that I was going to go down that path. Okay, Chen has a feeling. I do listen to, let me see. All right, I am going to respond to this. It's frustrating for me to tell the response from ETs because I always have a lot of thoughts in my mind. Do I keep doing interdimensional meditation, or are there mudras that help with that? Mudras help, but that's not what, mudras aren't about interdimensional meditation. But if you do, if you want to know something that will increase your ability to interact with higher dimensional beings, go here to 923.thunderwizard.com. The Maoshan 5-element forms will absolutely help open up. By the way, I'm absolutely convinced that those practices were downloaded to the master who invented them from mantis beings. I'm convinced of that those are the beings who taught it. So if you do a practice that these beings have downloaded and taught us to do, there's a very good chance you're going to interact with them. By the way, that's not the only one. There are other Qigong practitioners who say well, there's certain Qigong practices that if you do long enough, the mantis beings will show up. So mudras, I don't know about mudras, but should you do the Qigong I teach? That will definitely help you without a doubt. And should you keep doing interdimensional meditation? Yes. You say it's difficult for you to tell the response because you always have a lot of thoughts in your mind. So that tells me that you haven't read my book, Interdimensional Meditation, and especially Extraterrestrials Are Coming to Earth, because I explain in detail what telepathic communication is. And you do have to learn how to have your mind do its imagination thing and learn how to have that hook into the telepathic communication you're receiving. When you get a telepathic message, at the moment that you're getting the telepathic message, you will think it's your own mind talking to you. So you have to get used to being comfortable with your own mind talking to you. If you're doing it and you say, I have too many thoughts in my mind, and you're fighting your own inner dialogue, you're blocking out any telepathic communications. So you have to learn. Meditation is good because you learn how to calm your mind and you learn how to empty your mind. You learn how to know, what is your mind and what is intuition. Which, by the way, most of the time intuition is a higher dimensional being communicating to you, as well as your own soul, etc., etc. So yeah, keep doing it and get over yourself. Don't take that personally. Get over yourself. Get comfortable with not knowing. When I do interdimensional meditation, when I'm interacting and communicating, I don't judge what my brain is saying. I'm perfectly comfortable with the possibility that it's my own imagination talking to me. Now, after I've received the communication, I am almost sure that I know which is my own mind and which isn't. Because what will happen is when you're getting a telepathic message and you're not fighting it, you're allowing your mind to have its own thoughts. And what's happening is a thought will come to your mind that you think you're thinking, but you'll also have this experience of, I've never thought that before. And then if there's a higher dimensional energy that comes with it, your mind will go, what the hell was that all about? And you'll have this experience, and it can be a shocking experience. And that's how you know you've definitely had an interdimensional telepathic message. Now, there are times, it's not uncommon at all for me to go into interdimensional meditation and to begin a dialogue, and I find out real quick that I'm just making it up. And that happens a lot. There's a lot of times that ETs don't show up or aren't communicating for who knows however many reasons, but it's okay, because you're flexing that muscle of that. You're flexing your imagination muscle. You have to let your imagination interact with the process, or you will just be blocking it. Because if they were to force, I know this because I've interacted with extremely powerful beings who have sent me very clear, very powerful, very important telepathic messages that almost broke me. Because, my 3D brain went, there was just too much, too many gigabytes coming in and too much power coming in. So they know that, and they have to interact with you on a level that you can handle. So start out slowly, be patient, don't be attached. The other thing I do is when I'm having interdimensional meditation interaction, I take everything that comes to my mind at face value as being true, but I don't become emotionally attached to it. And what happens with that is when it doesn't turn out to be true, I'm not attached to it and I don't beat myself up. And when it does come true, I'm still as shocked and surprised as I always am. If you keep doing it, you'll understand it more. It'll become easier. All right, somebody's deleted all of their questions for some reason. I don't know why. Vitashik, let me read your question, see if I want to answer it. Give me a second while I read through this. So, Vitashik, you weren't paying attention. Here's what this tells me. It tells me, like I said, that you have an emotional attachment to needing to project onto the universe your third dimensional understanding. So go back and watch this video again, because I answer your question in the video. So the question is, if we're not allowed to go outside of our solar system, meaning that ETs won't let human beings at the moment fly outside of our solar system. If we're not allowed to go outside of our solar system due to the possibility of perpetuating bad actions on other ET civilizations, isn't it possible for other beings similar to us of a 3D matrix who were not contained in their So there's the fear in that question is absolutely it's just leaking out of you. That's okay. Get honest with that fear, but you're attached to being afraid. What I'm presenting to you is a free and safe universe, and you're resisting it. You're resisting it so much that you're looking for reasons to find possibilities why there might be. But again, you're talking about a three-dimensional, and again, you're not listening. If you've been watching my channel, you haven't been listening when I say, even here, a three-dimensional civilization would have to have the technology to go faster than the speed of light, or have the ability to go through wormholes. I'm not saying that's impossible, but the likelihood is very slim. So the idea that another third dimensional civilization from hundreds or millions of light years coming to Earth, but being filled with all of these lower vibrations, doesn't make any sense. Is it possible? Obviously, humans can do it. But if the ETs are aware of it and are containing it, guess what they're doing to the other ones? So you already say, you want to force down my throat this idea that we're being contained, but the other ones aren't. They're coming over the borders. They're coming after us. So yes, you're new to the channel. I welcome you to the channel. And the best thing I can do to you is bring to your attention your unconscious attachment to your fears. The other thing I can suggest to you is to do the interdimensional meditations and to do CE5 yourself talk to ETs. Why don't you ask them that question? They probably won't answer it because it might not be relevant to them. But at least if you interact with them, you'll get a better understanding of all this, and you won't need to stay stuck in all these too much thinking and fear. The other thing I want to tell you is I can tell by your question, besides the fact that you're new, you're not doing the practices. When you do the meditations and the practices that I teach, you won't think the way that you're thinking anymore. And I encourage you to do that so you can be free and not be, pushed around by your fears. Let's see. Chen has another question. Let me see if I want to answer it. You're asking me, I'm going to read your question because it's interesting. Have you met a being that looks like a galaxy, universe, space-looking skin with human-shaped body? Do you think it's the quantum field itself? So this isn't a good way to ask a question because you obviously have experienced this. So you need to put that in there. Make yourself part of the question. Make yourself vulnerable. Say, I met a being that looked this way. Have you ever met a being like that? Because when you ask a question, it's important that you inject yourself emotionally and make your emotions available to others. Otherwise, you're acting like you're just talking about something, something arbitrary, when in reality it has a strong emotional connection for you. And we can't connect to you emotionally if you don't share your emotions with us. I'm telling you this also because they respond well when you operate from your emotions. When you tell them you're afraid, you tell them that you're happy. In the first video of mine, How I Became an Extraterrestrial, you hear me repeating, I'm afraid, I'm afraid. I'm doing that on purpose. I'm doing that because I'm consciously telling that being, I'm letting you know that I'm scared to death right now, but I want what's happening here, and I'm not going to let my fear stop me. I'm afraid right now, but please keep communicating to me. If you interact with them and you know how to attach your emotions to what you're saying, you will get far better response from them. You'll also be healthier, happier, you'll have better relationships, and it will help teachers. Teachers will be able to answer your questions much better when they know what emotional problem you're trying to solve. All right, that's it. No more questions. Thank you guys for showing up. I love you all. Thanks for sitting through this. Again, I tried to put it as concisely as I could. I probably should have made 2 or 3 videos instead of putting it all in one, but what are you going to do? So again, these links are here for you, and if you don't do the work, you will not get the benefit. The best thing about this channel is that I give you practices, the free ones on the playlist, and the cheap ones here at the thunderwizard.com 90-day challenge, and the cheap ones here at 923.thunderwizard.com. You will not find these exercises anywhere else. Nothing in history has come close to the depth and the power of these practices. And if you do them, you will shift, you will change, and you will understand what I'm saying on a deeper level. If you don't do them, you will stay on the level of the superficial world, and you will get tossed around and lied to, and you won't know what the truth is. If you want to overcome it, I'm not the only game in town, but I don't know a better way to do it than following the practices that I teach. If you follow my directions to the letter consistently, I guarantee you a better life, happier life, more prosperous, and I guarantee you, you will shift if you do the work. If you don't do the work, nothing's going to happen. That's it for me, guys. I wish you all the best. I love you all. Thank you for showing up. And if I don't get taken up into the Starship Enterprise, or if the flash doesn't come, I will see you all very soon. Please take very good care of yourselves.